4 years ago, I got bit by a Black Widow, not the superhero. It was this creature. It's the worst pain I'd ever felt, but I held out hope that I would get spider powers. Did I? No. What is up, MCU fans? Welcome back to the channel. I got the opportunity to check out an early screening for Black Widow, and I'm here to tell you guys whether it's worth watching or not. So as always, get in that comment section below. Let me know, were you excited for Black Widow? And if you're here for the first time, we love to talk all things movies and streaming. So if you want to subscribe, that would be awesome. And don't worry, this is not my normal set. The new set's coming. Here's a sneak peek. Let's get into it. So, pursued by a force that will stop at nothing to bring her down, Natasha must deal with her history as a spy and the broken relationships left in her wake long before she became an Avenger. Y'all, it feels good to get another Marvel movie. We've been getting a lot of Marvel content this year, but it will be nice to go and watch this thing on a big screen upon release. Now, I got a digital screener, so I didn't get to watch this in the theater, but it feels like this big action blockbuster extravaganza that will work even better on a bigger screen. And you say, Austin, it's a Black Widow standalone prequel in-betweequel. That's not a word. I thought it was going to be smaller scale, and, you know, speaking for myself, I did kind of think it was going to be smaller scale. And it starts out that way, and there are so many moments throughout the film that get to that point. This movie deals with, funny enough, Fast 9 just came out, this movie deals with
I got family.
Family. And when we get those moments, that bond between four characters in particular, and we'll talk about those characters, those were the moments that resonated with me the most. And we get a lot of that in the beginning. And honestly, the opening act, I was all here for. It felt different, so distinct from other Marvel movies. We get a look into the upbringing of Natasha, shades of things we've seen in other movies before, but an entirely different story than expected, and great performances from David Harbour and really your two parental figures. And you get a peek into that life. But as we progress through the movie, you see that there are certain things about that story that, well, we need to expand upon and learn more about. And once we do, that's when the story became really intriguing and interesting. Now, speaking upon the cast, that's where we're going to start. Two highlights here for me, okay? Obviously, Scarlett Johansson. She doesn't count because you know she's going to be incredible. She owns this role, and, you know, being her final role, and she's come out and said this, she did a wonderful job. But the two standouts that are kind of newer to the Marvel Universe, David Harbour, who is just incredible. His sense of humor, and there's one character trait in particular that comic fans, you know exactly what you're going to get with this. I won't spoil it or say what it is right now in this review. Maybe when we talk spoilers. But that character trait was so fantastic. It felt like the comic books come to life. And the more he talked about it, the more I'm like, I'm loving everything he is throwing at me. Love his inclusion. And then, of course, Florence Pugh. And I won't say where her character goes, but her dynamic with Scarlett Johansson, it really is like exactly what you want. They feel like sisters. And obviously they're playing sisters, but you need to feel that tension between them because of what happened in their past. But you also have to feel that love, that brotherly, sisterly gratitude and attitude. And that's exactly what I got from their relationship. And you can tell they're both top tier performers, right? But when they're together, it's incredible. Other than maybe one choreography-filled scene at the beginning when Florence Pugh first shows up, it was a little awkward. That was the only moment when the hand-to-hand combat, that action didn't work for me. Other than that, her character worked great, and the action from there on out, when it didn't get too extravagant, that really is my one complaint and nitpick when it comes to this film, is I wanted it to stay smaller scale throughout the movie, and we get a lot of that. We really do, and those moments were awesome, heartfelt. I was having a great time. When the movie tries to go blockbuster heavy and it really implements, you know, all-out CGI, and you've seen a couple of the scenes in the trailer, right? When she's falling through the sky and things are blowing up and so many things happening at once. I like what they're trying to do with the story there. It almost feels like James Bond Mission Impossible. There's a lot of James Bond-filling elements throughout this film. But when it comes to that grand scale, so many fights happening at once with all of these different characters, I wish there was less of that in the third act and more of what we got in the first two acts that felt more personal for me. That's what I wanted throughout the movie, a personal story for Natasha Romanoff, and we get that for most of the movie. But when it goes kind of beyond that and tries to be something that it's not, this big Marvel semi-formulaic blockbuster, that's when the film was at its weakest for me, even though entertainment-wise, I'm having a good time, right? Watching it, you're eating the popcorn if you're in the theater. It's that kind of movie, right? But I was somewhat missing that more personal touch that we got at other points in the movie. In terms of the action itself, I saw a few comments saying, well, are they going to scale down the action, or is it going to be more like The Winter Soldier, extremely brutal? And when they do focus on, person v. person as opposed to big CGI showdown, it does get brutal, and you see some very tragic and hardcore elements that I'm actually surprised made it into a PG-13 movie. Now, we're focusing on the action here. It doesn't get bloody, because obviously it's not rated R, but there would be blood if it did have that R rating, especially at the beginning of the movie, and that's what I was really just excited to continue getting, man. The action here is brutal, and I made the Winter Soldier comparison. That's kind of what it feels like, and there's also a Winter Soldier quality to the character of Taskmaster. Not talking about personality, but every time Taskmaster comes on screen, the movie almost gets darker automatically. The score kind of changes a little bit. It becomes kind of this operatic and epic grand score, whereas most of the movie brings us a score that's good. It's not one of the most memorable scores in the MCU, but the music really amps up, and you're afraid to the level that I was afraid during Captain America the Winter Soldier. Winter Soldier's walking very slowly. You feel that fear. Same thing with Taskmaster. Very slow, ominous. You feel that fear. Now, there is an element to Taskmaster's story that I wish was fleshed out even more so than it was. We get it. There's something that happens, and there's a quality and element that is very human to that, but at the same time, I don't know if they quite nailed Taskmaster like they could have with that backstory. Now, I do want to switch gears just a second and talk about the Avengers, right? 2012, everybody's favorite movie. There were a couple of lines of dialogue that really hold over to this film. Well, there's one or two elements I do want to go back and kind of rewatch that movie and listen to some of the things that they say. The lines of dialogue that they hit on from that film that carry over into this movie, I like the way that they tied that in together. It, always reigns true that Marvel, they're planning things out years in advance, all that stuff. And I don't know if they plan this out strategically, but the way that they utilize those things, carrying them over into this film, I have to give them kudos for it. It's pretty cool. And of course, with Marvel, you get the trademark sense of humor that it often brings with a movie like this. And we get that, surprisingly, a lot darker than most of the standalone Marvel movies. Maybe not as much humor. There's a nice little banter going back and forth between Pugh's character and, of course, Black Widow, and she's often given her a hard time for, her style of fighting, how she tends to be a bit showy for the people. She's an Avenger. Get a lot of Easter eggs, references throughout this movie. The only other big nitpick that I have, beyond what I've already mentioned, is the fact that, talking about big, grand action scenes, some things happen here where our characters will get in a situation, and if it was Captain America who has the super soldier serum, or an individual with superpowers, I'd be like, oh yeah, they could have survived that. But being Black Widow, who doesn't have superpowers, and granted, she is a badass character, absolutely, but, some things happen, and I'm like, I don't know if she could have actually survived that, but she also, fights Thanos at a point, so that's really nitpicky. I'm sorry. Before I give you guys my score, hey, if you're here, whether it be for the first time or not, and you want to subscribe or drop this video a thumbs up, it helps tremendously, and it tells me you guys like what we're doing on this channel. Appreciate the support. Black Widow is full of action and heart. To my surprise, the movie is at its best during the quiet moments, and honestly, I wish there were more of them. The theme here is family, and that holds true throughout. Also, Florence Pugh, David Harbour, they crush it, as well as Scarlett Johansson. Man, I'm going to miss you as this character. I'm going a 74% for my score. A solid score, a good MCU movie, not top tier for me. Some things I wanted the movie to do just a bit better, and maybe even show restraint from. It doesn't quite do that in the third act, but overall, a good time, maybe for you, a good time at the theater, and you're seeing it on screen. We had a few people actually predict my score. As always, I'm posting my first reaction on the community page, and a lot of predictions. Well, here's the people that were right. I want to say thank you so much for interacting with this channel and staying patient with me. Again, we're working on the new set. It's a slow process, just bought a house, so trying to spend money slow and strategically, but it's getting there. I want it to be the best it can possibly be before I show it to you guys. In the meantime, we have a fireplace, so that's what we're doing. All right, guys, appreciate it. See you soon.